Not an answer, not a scheme, not a strategy, not a way to fix things. It's just a story. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to pay attention to. Nothing to take notes about. None of that. It's just a little thing that happened. I kind of have a nose for these things. They kind of stay with me. And if they stay with me longer than about 48 hours, they turn into a book eventually. So I got to really pay attention to what I'm paying attention to. So I'm not just walking around looking at everything. Because there's not enough books in me to do that. So this is a true story. I'm going to set it up for you, and then I may read a little bit from it. It's the very last section of Come of Age. But you may never look at it because it's confounding English. Anyway, true story, really happened. Goes like this. I think. Because it's been a while. So I may get a certain part wrong, and if I do, you'll correct me, okay? You'll tell me, oh, it doesn't go like that. Do you remember? What was this? So there comes a time in your life, if you have children, when you realize, in a very short time, it will never be like this between us again. That means that they're getting older and you don't think you are. Just they're getting older. You're staying. Of course, they could tell you that you're getting older, but why listen to them, right? Comes a time when you look at your daughter, as I did, and you realize if you don't do it now, her life will pick up steam. Her fascination with her friends will replace you like that, and so on. And you better ask now. And the worst that can happen is she has no sense of the importance of this moment, and you do, and the distance has already begun. Or the distance is made manifest again. I said to her, if you could go anywhere in the world with me, just the two of us, where would it be? She didn't have to think 3 seconds. She said, Ireland. Ireland. And in a week, that's where we were. So we landed, it was a long trip. Landed in the middle of the night. Don't forget I'm a North American. And man, they're driving on the wrong side of the road. That's not how bad it was. They're driving on the wrong side of the road at night. I don't know where they drive in the daytime, but at night, they're on the wrong side of the road. Wait, on the wrong side of the car. On the wrong side of the road. It's terrifying. But I don't have an Irish person to drive me. Oh, shit, I have to drive. On the wrong side of the car, on the wrong side of the road, in the dark, jet-lagged, hungry, and not knowing where the accommodation is. With my 50-year-old daughter looking at me like that. Like, this is completely your idea, right? Now, here's the thing. You think things are going to go pretty well because you figured out how to not stall, and you're just going in the dark on the wrong side. But everybody's on the wrong side, and maybe they won't notice that you don't know. But here's what happens. They've invented this thing lately in the last, 15, 20 years. We've never had them at home. They were all over Ireland. You know what they're called? It's a mind-bending thing called a roundabout. I had no idea what it was. I didn't know how it worked, what it was for, where it began, where it ended, how to get on, how to get off, in the dark, on the wrong side, to signal to anybody. There's lanes and lanes, and they just keep going around. And then if you're lucky, it just throws you into one of the exits. Just centrifugal force, just boom. Anyway, it was terrifying. Somehow we got to the accommodation. I was a mess by the time I got there. We woke up the next morning, looked out the window. It's an old house. An old manor house, rich person's house from the old days. Looked out the window, literally, right beside the house. Fenced off, with cows around, but I knew exactly what I was looking at. It was not a roundabout, it was a round stone formation. It turned out to be 4,000 years old, which I know you don't think it's all that old, but over there is pretty old. And for me, from North America, it's old as God, more or less. This remarkable old building was literally right beside where we were staying. And I looked at my daughter, and she looked at me, because she's kind of used to weird stuff happening when I'm around. She just looks at me like, really? I said, see? We're on it. We're on to something. We're guided right here. You know, all is well. We should be fine. So we kind of toured around a little bit. And what ended up happening, almost everywhere we stopped or stayed, sooner or later, somebody would start talking to me about some kind of hurt in their lives. Now, partly this is because they're Irish. So they're just really good at hurting out loud, and they are. And they're not too shy. Oh no, not shy at all. Not that the English like me. And I suppose there's something that has come to me over the course of my life that makes me look like I'd be a guy that you could talk to about your sadness or something. Anyway, this happened frequently. On the morning in question, we went down to have breakfast in the B&B, I guess it was. And the guy who was serving us was an ex-priest, which is a very phenomenal event in human history. For somebody to be completely a priest and then completely not. It's quite a shocking turn of events. So this ex-priest was serving us. And he began to talk to me about what he called an epidemic of suicide amongst young men in particular that was happening just then when we were there. I wasn't aware of it, but he spoke about it so grievously, and he was so distressed about it. And somehow he thought it was important that I hear this, and that my daughter hear it. That's how the day began. And then we drove down the highway and drove into a town called Sligo. Anybody ever been to Sligo in Ireland? No, Nick puts up her hand, I know you have. Anyway, so I drove down the street, wrong side of everything, and something caught my eye just as I went past it, and I knew I was supposed to go there. And these are the things you really listen to when you've been lucky enough to be on the receiving end of this kind of stuff from life from time to time, and I have been. It's one of the things that brought me here, that very thing. This was Ireland. This was on the main street of Sligo, and I found a place to park, and I got out of the car with my daughter, and we doubled back and walked down the main road trying to find this thing that I'd seen but couldn't remember what it was. And it turned out it was green tiles on the outside of a shop. And it turned out the shop had a big window in the middle of the wall there, beside the door. And it turned out it was a butcher shop, or it had been a butcher shop. Because the rails that the meat hung on once upon a time were all in the window there, but there was no meat there at all. It was clearly not a butcher shop anymore. It was full of carved wooden figures, full of it. Some of them this big, some this big, some all kinds of them. I would say scores and scores of them. Now, I'd done a lot of carving myself by now. I kind of knew what I was looking at. And something told me to go in. So in I went, my daughter behind me. And the proprietor was on the other side of the counter. And he was talking to somebody for a little while. So I was just looking around. And I realized that all these figures he was making were Celtic deities. They were all images and personages from Celtic mythology and so on. Right? This is what he'd given his whole life to, clearly. So eventually the customer went out, and I went to talk to the man, and things went very well, very easily for a few minutes. And I said, yes, I do this kind of thing too, and I admire this and this and this. And as we were talking, there was one piece on the counter between us, quite large, not quite finished. And I said to him, and this, what do we have here? He said, that's a temporary gravestone. Temporary gravestone. He said, it is, he said. And there was a long pause, and he says, it's for my son. And then there's another pause, and he says, took his own life, he did. A fortnight ago. That's like 3.5 weeks ago. Took his own life, he said. And then he said, 'twas his right. It was his right, he said, about the suicide. And another pause, and he said, this world was too hard a place for him. And that's where we are. And as he has his hands on this, and my daughter's watching, and the man looks at me, and I look at him, and before either one of us know what's going on, we're reaching across, holding each other, with his face on mine, feeling his whiskers, and his tears going down my cheek. Complete strangers, 10 minutes before, brought together in this grief. The son was part of the epidemic that the ex-priest was telling me about that very morning. You can't invent these things, but you do have to obey them when they come. We spent another few minutes together. I know my daughter's getting a little like, this is too strong, it's too strange, can't we just have a normal time? Dad. So I put my hand on the doorknob to try to leave. And I have to make myself turn the doorknob, because a moment like this, with this kind of human-to-human contact, I don't know about for you, but for me, even with all the work I've done, not that common. Not something you just want to leave behind because the time's passing or because your daughter wants to go somewhere else. But I had my hand on the doorknob, and the man said to me, I won't imitate the accent anymore, it'll confuse you, but he said to me, a bit of advice, he said, means, can I give you some advice? He said. And I didn't look at him. I just said, sure. And he said, never harm a poet. Translation, never harm a poet. That's what he said. Never harm a poet. It just rang in my mind, the sheer unlikeliness of this piece of advice, which wasn't advice at all. It was life direction he was giving me. It was direct transmission from Celtic central casting. It was unbelievable. Never harm a poet, he said. And I thought about it for a second. And I said, okay, Michael, I won't. I was hoping that I could keep the promise, that I hadn't done so yet, harmed a poet. But you never know. Poets they're easy to hurt, in a way. I met one yesterday. I know it's true. They're easy to hurt. They're hurting types. They are. But Michael saw that I couldn't go through the door with this advice now. Never harm a poet. In fact, the advice kept me there now. It's harder to leave, just like life. Harder to leave, the better it gets. So he says, well, and he says, another. And I said, sure. And he said, never love a poet neither. Translation, never love a poet either. Oh my God, never love a poet. What are you supposed to do with this kind of information? What are you supposed to do with this life advice? With this sage old man who's in the depths of his sorrow about his own son, who clearly is a poet himself, telling me, never harm a poet, never love a poet neither, he said. My God, I was thinking, what do I say back to this? And is it possible to not love a poet? Really? Anyway, somehow I said to him, all right, Michael, I won't. I won't harm one. And I won't love one, if you say. But you know, nothing comes in twos. You know that. No matter if it's jokes or cosmic jokes, they always come in three. And Michael knew it too. And so he said to me, how well now, he said, I'll give you the third and you'll be gone. I said, all right then. He said, never be a poet. Oh God, what did I say in a moment like this? I can't believe I said this now that I think about it, but I did. I said to him, Michael, I said, it's too late. Do you know what he said? He didn't miss a moment. He said, I said, it's too late for the both of us. And with that, I walked out the door with my daughter behind me as the only witness to what had taken place. And those three pieces of advice rolling around in my almost Irish head. And time goes by when things like this happen. And mysteriously something happens that's so close to what happened once that you can't scarcely believe the resemblance. I was in a used bookstore, which is a place that you should go if you want to remember anything worth remembering. I was in a used bookstore. I went immediately to the poetry section. Yeah. And I was thumbing through the poetry. And I found a book. And it was called Daddy, Daddy. And it was written by a man named Paul Durkin. And I just opened it up, just like that. I'll read you how this story ends, and with this I'll say goodnight. I saw a book titled, Daddy, Daddy, and the poet's name, Paul Durkin, unknown to me then, but an Irishman, the jacket said, and so perhaps he was the maker of something considerable. The Irish not only saved civilization, they tell us, but they raised conversation to something approaching an art form. A few days later, I found a poem called Antwerp, 1984, an account of a train trip that he took with his aging, Parkinson's agitated father, retired from the law, and as the poem tells you, 5 years from his death. It seems that the poet found that his father was slipping away from him even then in the train ride. Whatever it was, of the troubles they'd had together early on in the poet's life. All of that seemed to be behind them now. And the poet began to make an oath. Do you know the word oath? Yeah, what is it? Yeah. He began to make an oath to the old man, his father, there shaking. And he promised him what he'd do with him when he died. What he'd do with his body in particular. And this is what he said. And I pledge, promise, I pledge that when they fell you, when you die, while they will sell you for firewood, I will give logs of you to a wood carver in Sligo, Michael Kirk of Wine Street, butcher turned wood carver, out of which to make magic statuettes of the gods and goddesses of Ireland, the Celtic deities, and I will wash your body in linseed oil and turpentine, and I will put you in the window of his butcher shop on Wine Street. And you know, I wrote that 18 years ago, something like that, and it happened 15 years before that. And you know the detail I'd completely forgotten? I remember that his father was sick, but I didn't remember why. But I opened it up 8 months ago and reread it for the first time in years. And there his father is slowly disappearing from Parkinson's. You can't make these things up. The circles that come round and come round. And I tell you this for two reasons. One, to tell you these things really happen in this world. They really do. Crisis or no crisis, they do. And they will. And I promised you. And I would not be surprised that some of us find ourselves together, even though the likelihood of it is so little. But now, I wouldn't be surprised anymore. I would be happy of it. And you and I could trade stories of, do you remember all those crazy hours and hours in that hall? And these people taking pictures and the whole thing, and all the translation upon translation, and nothing made any sense, and still we came back and we came back, and we still don't know why, and we have no idea who you are, and all the rest. Listen, if that never happens, this has been magic for myself, magic for Natalie, my wife, I know for sure. And you're responsible for that. Crisis or no crisis. This is one of the things you've done, is you've made the world a little bigger by including me in it for a little while. And the gift that you've given me every day and every evening, you will never really know what it means as I sit here and become somebody's old man in Antwerp in 1984. But please believe me when I tell you, this is a gift that I will take with me into the ground. And P.S., do you know how I've learned all of these things? Yeah, you do. I've learned them by being at the deathbeds of so many fellow human beings. And I made promises to them that their dying wouldn't just disappear when they do. And you have given me the gift of keeping that promise.